The rain came down in sheets, a relentless roar that drowned out the world. Sophie Carter, barely 22, gripped the steering wheel of her old hatchback, her knuckles white as she squinted through the fogged windshield. Her heart thudded in her chest, a mix of adrenaline and dread. The storm had turned the rural roads of Willow Creek into a slick, treacherous maze, and she was late for her shift at the diner. Come on, she muttered, her voice tight with frustration. Then, a sickening screech of metal tore through the night. Sophie slammed on the brakes, her car skidding to a stop. Her breath caught as she peered through the downpour. Ahead, a black pickup truck had smashed through the guardrail of the old stone bridge, its taillights vanishing into the swollen Willow River below. "Oh my God," she gasped, her stomach lurching. Without a second thought, she threw the car into park, flung open the door, and stepped into the storm. Rain stung her face like needles, and the wind ripped at her denim jacket, but she didn't hesitate. She ran to the edge of the bridge, her boots slipping on the wet pavement, and looked down. The truck was sinking fast, its hood already swallowed by the churning current. Inside the cab, a figure slumped motionless behind the wheel. Sophie's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Fear screamed at her to stay put, to call for help, but there was no time. She scrambled over the guardrail, her hands shaking as she slid down the muddy embankment, grasping at roots and rocks to keep from falling. The river's edge was a chaos of foam and debris, and the water was colder than she'd imagined. Icy, brutal, pulling at her the moment she dove in. She swam with everything she had, her arms burning as she fought the current. Her lungs screamed, but she reached the truck just as the water crept over the window. The man inside hadn't moved. His face was pale, his eyes closed, a battered black cowboy hat still clutched in one hand. Sophie pounded on the glass, her voice raw. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. The door was stuck, pinned by the pressure of the water. Gritting her teeth, she smashed her elbow against the window, once, twice, 3 times, until it shattered. Pain shot through her arm, but she ignored it, reaching in to grab the man's jacket. He was heavy, a dead weight that dragged her under as she pulled him free. The river fought her every move, but Sophie kicked upward, her lungs on fire. When her head broke the surface, she gasped, coughing up water, and dragged him toward the shore. Her muscles screamed, her body numb from the cold, but she didn't stop until they collapsed on the muddy bank. She lay there for a moment, gasping, her chestnut hair plastered to her face, before turning to the man. Her fingers found his neck, a pulse, faint but there. Relief flooded her, sharp and overwhelming. "Hey," she said, slapping his cheek gently. "Wake up! Don't you dare quit on me now!" He coughed, his eyes fluttering open just enough to meet hers. They were gray, stormy, and filled with something she couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe, or disbelief. "You okay?" she asked, blinking rain from her lashes. His lips parted, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Thank you. I owe you my life." Before she could respond, his eyes closed again. Sophie fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped it, and called 911. She stayed with him, shielding him with her jacket, her teeth chattering as she whispered, "Hold on. Just hold on." At the hospital, Sophie gave her statement, her clothes still damp and her mind reeling. The man had no ID, and by morning he was gone. Checked out in the middle of the night, leaving no name, no note. She returned the next day with a bag of muffins, hoping to see him, but the nurse just shook her head. "He's a ghost," she said. Sophie drove home in silence, her chest tight with a strange mix of disappointment and curiosity. Who was he? Why did his face, those gray eyes, that battered hat, linger in her mind like a song she couldn't shake? Days passed, and Willow Creek settled back into its quiet rhythm. Sophie went through the motions at the diner, pouring coffee and flipping burgers, but her thoughts kept drifting to the river, to the man she'd pulled from the wreck. She told the story a few times, to her coworker Mia, to her mom, to the mailman who nodded sagely and said, "Sounds like a drifter. Lucky to be alive." But Sophie couldn't let it go. There was something about him, something that felt unfinished. Then, on a crisp morning, she saw him. She was wiping down the diner's counter when she glanced out the window and froze. Across the street, he stood with a dolly stacked with crates, helping old Mr. Jenkins unload supplies into his corner store. The black cowboy hat was unmistakable, its brim worn and faded. His jeans were clean, his boots scuffed but sturdy, and he moved with a quiet purpose, avoiding attention. Sophie's heart skipped. Their eyes met through the glass, and he smiled. A small, knowing smile, before tipping his hat and turning away. From that day, he was everywhere. One morning, he was changing a tire for Mrs. Larson, whose car had broken down outside the pharmacy. The next, he was repainting the community center's fence, the white paint flecking his hands as he worked. He carried groceries for a veteran, fixed a porch step for a widow, always in that same outfit, a plain flannel shirt, jeans, boots, and that hat tilted low over his eyes. He never asked for thanks, never lingered for praise. People called him the Cowboy, though no one knew his name. To most, he was Luke, a name he gave sparingly, with a nod and a smile that made you feel seen. Sophie watched him from a distance, her curiosity growing into something warmer, something she didn't want to name. He started coming to the diner, always early, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and a blueberry muffin. "Morning, Sophie," he'd say, his voice low and steady, and she'd feel her cheeks flush despite herself. He'd ask about her day, her dreams, her mom's bad knees, and he listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. It was disarming, the way he seemed to care without asking for anything in return. One slow Tuesday, he lingered longer than usual, leaning against the counter as she refilled his coffee. "This place smells like home," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Sophie arched a brow, trying to hide her smile. "Grease and coffee? That's your idea of home?" He chuckled, a sound that warmed the air. "The good kind." He ordered a dozen donuts for the nursing home down the street, leaving a tip that covered the bill twice over. As he left, he paused, glancing at her name tag. "Sophie," he said, like he was testing the weight of it. "Thank you for that night." Her breath caught. "I haven't forgotten," he added, then tipped his hat and walked out. After that, Luke became a fixture in her mornings. He'd pass by the diner before opening, tapping the window with a grin if she was inside. He'd order small things, an apple pie slice, a coffee to go, and ask how her mom was doing, or what book she was reading. He never talked about himself, no matter how she tried to pry. "Where'd you learn to fix cars?" she'd ask, and he'd shrug, steering the conversation back to her. It was infuriating and endearing all at once. One morning, he brought her a coffee before her shift, handing it to her with a quiet, "Figured you're always giving. Thought you might like to receive for once." They sat on the bench outside the diner, watching the town wake up. Sophie's heart felt full, but her questions gnawed at her. "Why Willow Creek?" she asked. "You could be anywhere." Luke looked out at the horizon, his jaw tight. "Some places pull you in. Hard to explain." She didn't press, but the mystery of him grew heavier. Their routine became a comfort, small moments that stitched themselves into her days. He'd hold the diner door open, buy a coffee, linger just long enough to make her laugh. And though he was still a stranger in so many ways, Sophie felt a pull toward him, a warmth that scared her as much as it thrilled her. When he asked her to the Willow Creek Harvest Festival, she froze, her rag stilling on the counter. "You up for some music and apple cider?" he said, his half-smile teasing. "Like a date?" she asked, her voice betraying her nerves. He shrugged. "Call it whatever gets you to say yes." She laughed, her heart racing. "Okay, why not?" The festival was alive with light and sound. Amber lanterns strung across the town square, booths selling cider and pies, kids chasing each other with sticky hands. Sophie arrived in a navy sweater and jeans, her auburn hair loose. Luke was waiting, holding 2 cups of cider, his cowboy hat low, and a navy shirt tucked neatly into his jeans. "You look nice," she said, taking the cider. He grinned. "You smell like vanilla." She rolled her eyes. "I always smell like vanilla." They wandered the booths, sharing roasted corn and laughing as the butter dripped down their chins. Luke tried the ring toss and failed spectacularly. Sophie won a tiny stuffed fox at the dart game and tucked it into his pocket, insisting he keep it. With him, she felt lighter, like the weight of her worries, her mom's health, the diner's bills, could wait for one night. She told him about her dad, gone since she was 8, and her mom's strength. Luke listened, his eyes soft. "That's a lot for a kid to carry," he said. She nodded. "Willow Creek catches you when you fall." He glanced at the square, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, it does." As they danced to a slow country tune under the lights, Sophie felt her guard slip. His hand was warm in hers, his steps sure. You're good at this, she said, breathless. Used to be, he replied, and the hint of sadness in his voice made her ache. Later, on a bench with fresh cider, she asked, Have you been here before? You know this place too well. He tensed, his fingers tightening around his cup. I've passed through, she pressed. That's not what I meant. He looked away. Some things are better left alone, Sophie. Her heart sank, a crack forming in the warmth between them. The next morning, everything changed. Luke stepped outside the diner to take a call, and Sophie overheard his low voice through the open door. I'll decide by Friday. Willow Creek's future depends on it. Tell Crescent Group to wait. Her blood ran cold. Crescent Group, the real estate giant that owned half the county, including the land her mom's house sat on. Her hands shook as she ducked behind the counter, her mind racing. Who was he? When he came back, flashing his usual smile, she could barely meet his eyes. That evening, she searched his name, Luke Everett Crescent, heir to Crescent Group, a reclusive billionaire who avoided the spotlight. The cowboy wasn't a drifter. He owned Willow Creek. Anger and betrayal churned in her chest. When he showed up with coffee the next day, she confronted him. Why didn't you tell me who you are? His face fell, surprise giving way to resignation. I was going to. When? She snapped. After you bought the rest of us out? He set his coffee down, his voice low. It's not like that. I came here to figure out what mattered. I didn't expect you. Her eyes burned. You let me trust you. Was I just part of your game? He didn't flinch, but pain flickered in his eyes. I came here to control something. Then I met you, and I realized I didn't want to control anything. I just wanted to be here, with you. She shook her head, her voice breaking. You should have told me. He nodded. I know. Then he walked away. Luke vanished, leaving a hole in Sophie's days. The diner felt emptier, the bench outside unused. Then a letter arrived, slipped under the diner's door. A proposal for a luxury resort that would bulldoze half of Willow Creek, including her mom's land. Sophie's hands shook as she read it. At the town hall meeting, she stood, her voice trembling but firm. This isn't growth, it's destruction. We're not just land, we're people. The room erupted in applause, but her heart was heavy. She hoped Luke was listening. A week later, he returned. The town hall doors swung open, and Luke walked in. No hat, no pretense, just a man in a black shirt and jeans. He faced the crowd, his voice steady. My name is Luke Crescent. I came here to decide your future, but you showed me what matters. There will be no resort. The land belongs to you. Cheers erupted. He met Sophie's eyes and she saw it. Regret, hope, resolve. Later, he handed her a deed to a riverfront lot, zoned for her dream, a community center. It's yours, he said. Do what you want with it. She looked at him, her voice soft. You meant it. He nodded. Every word. They built the Willow Creek Community Hub together, painting walls, arguing over light fixtures, laughing until their sides hurt. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. One evening, as they sat on the steps, Luke pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring with a river stone, rough and beautiful. You didn't just save me from the river, he said, his voice thick. You saved me from a life I didn't want. I want this one, with you. Tears stung her eyes as she took the ring. There's always been room for you, she whispered. The hub opened with a crowd, laughter and sunlight. Sophie stood beside Luke, her mom beaming, the town alive with hope. As they cut the ribbon, she knew this was more than a building. It was a promise. To each other, to Willow Creek, to a life built from courage and love. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption and home. If Sophie and Luke's story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of second chances, or made you believe in the goodness of small acts, please like, share, and subscribe to One Kind Moment. Every story here is meant to inspire, heal, and remind you that love finds us in the most unexpected places. Keep your heart open. Until next time.